podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I very much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. This is the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast with Justice Rajee. I am joined by my guest today, Paul Dang. Peace, Paul.
Peace. Good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Enjoying today is a Sunday that we're recording on, so I guess I can put that on the record. Enjoying a Sunday, man. To get into the groove of things, I always like to start with you sharing just someone or some people or what have you want to give some love, respect, or reverence to. So who would you like to give some love, respect, reverence to at the moment?
I find that when people ask these type of questions, it can be really difficult. So I'd rather just say hello and acknowledge everybody that's listening to this podcast. And I certainly want to give a shout out to the city of Pittsburgh, where I'm from. I'm currently in Houston, Texas. Much love to Pittsburgh and as well as Houston, Texas, where I'm living at, and pretty much everybody. Just
All
saying
right.
what's up to everybody.
Word up. Peace. So let's begin. The place I always like to start, and I start with is, Paul, can you share a standard or practice, some value, something that you do, that kind of guides, just one thing in how you move through the world?
Yeah, I did a little bit of thinking about this actually a few weeks ago as well. I try to be very intentional with my time, and I think that's sort of the initial thing that I think about when it comes to sort of a standard of practice. I find that as I'm getting older, time being the most valuable commodity, I want to be really thoughtful with my time.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, I try to be as intentional with my energy and the time that I utilize in doing things throughout the course of a day. So um, when I think it's the idea of being intentional with one's time, I um, I get into sort of this idea of a routine or a regiment, right? So it's for me a good practice of good rest, um, and that's been a process in of itself. There's that saying that just because that you're sleeping doesn't mean that you're rested.
Mm-hmm.
So I get into, and I have been for some time now, just really learning to kind of turn off a lot of the mental stimulation that occurs at night, and to give myself a lot of space to kind of like get into the mode of resting and relaxing. It's been very helpful for me. So when I get up in the morning, I follow suit with the intention of priming. And that's sort of the idea of setting a specific intention during the course of the day, of giving myself the kind of energy and focus that I need. So I meditate good 15, 20 minutes in the morning, just getting a lot of quiet time with myself. Then I get into a physical exercise and regimen, a good 60 minutes, hour and a half of just good, solid physical exercise. Review my plan for the day, though I don't I always say that I don't fall in love with my plan, just because it's just things in life, right? As you know, as you get older, you realize that it's like the old saying Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
So give myself a little leeway so I don't get disappointed in myself if I don't execute everything. Then I go throughout the process of executing. But the one thing that I try to be very mindful of is to be in a practice, a continual practice of a daily decrease, as opposed to sort of the daily increase of life. So,
Okay.
um, if that is such a standard, I know I was being a little bit elaborate on that, but that is sort of um, roots back to the idea of being intentional with my time as best as I can. I'm not perfect, so that's what I do.
Huh. That's peace. Can I ask? You added something there around a daily decrease versus increase. So just so I make sure I understand, it's almost like instead of adding maybe more things to the plate as the day goes on, is that kind of the idea? Like looking at it as I've set out to do these things. Let me not expand it. I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, that could certainly be something very in general what I say, but
Mm-hmm.
to what that means to you and to everybody else is different. For me, when I say about that, it's the idea of not piling on, exactly to your point, not
Okay.
piling too much onto your plate, then all of a sudden you start spreading yourself rather thin.
Mm.
And I'm guilty of that. I've been historically guilty of that. So yeah, that's what I mean by that.
Indeed, indeed. I mean, I think most of us uh, can be have fallen or found themselves in the place where you had had an agenda or response, something clear or semi-clear at least that you were working on, and then the other things show up, and you're like, oh, okay, I could do that too, and I could do that too, and then it's like, oh man, and then you can begin fretting about like the new thing or the other thing because you can't. Maybe you start to realize you're not going to get all that done today. I would
Yeah.
think.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and in addition to that, I also say it from a mental health standpoint too.
Hmm.
This is a big chunk of my life. I do therapy in the realm of mental health, and what we're seeing, and this could be a further discussion, but what
Hmm.
we see as therapists are individuals that are so overwhelmed in their head that they're always, and it's a natural sort of human behavior, is to be in the constant space of wanting to know more, kind of like sort of
Hmm.
like the it's kind of like the national enquirer, and inquiring minds want to know, and that's the
Yeah.
nature of a lot of people, right? People can be very curious, and our phone, which is a great gift and a tool, can also be our enemy when all we do is consume and consume and consume.
Hmm. Yeah. The feeling of, wait, Paul, did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay, cool. I thought I pushed something. The well, I think about there's like an abundance of information. In in a previous time, with different technology, it was easier to see the end of the back of the encyclopedia, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then when you get your phone or even on your computer, like if you want to go on a 5 hour deep dive of looking for stuff on something,
Yeah.
you can find lots of stuff. It may not be good quality. It may not be good information. It may be weird. Maybe somebody saying the same. It may be 400 people reinterpreting the two things that someone, studied, but
Yeah.
you could end up going through all of them. Um, something I heard in there was a sense of kind of knowing when to turn it off. Is that in any way sort of also a part of your own like structure to the day of saying, yeah, like this is when I'm gonna shut it down, or is it something different than that? Am I on the right?
Yeah. I think everybody. Well, I'll speak for myself that I'm in this continual process of developing a system of filtering, um, and filtering for on a basic level, just even self preservation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, being the fact that, to your point earlier about how there's this point of when you go down that rabbit hole of information, there is something else that reveals itself that maybe gets you to want to learn about this other thing and then other thing and other thing, and you realize that it's just infinite, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's, for me, that's an important part of for my own my own well-being and my own just personal sanity. Just
Mm-hmm.
turn that off a little bit. Live
Mm-hmm.
life in real time.
Mm. Oh, oh, oh. So, relationships, broadly defined. Uh, what is something that you understand now better or different than maybe the way you understood it, as a younger man or a younger time in your life?
Great question. I realized for myself that I had historically been a bit of a caretaker,
Mm-hmm.
and I had learned to let go of trying to control, situations as it relates to people. And I find that if I have to shine some sort of light onto something, um, that I think is important to do it with empathy and never be sort of in a place of shaming someone. Um, I've been in a lot of experiences in engaging with individuals, and whether in like what you say, intimate situations or professional
Mm-hmm.
situations, community. And I think that it's just better to just be more in a place of yielding, being more accepting, let people be who they are. And I think that's the thing that I've learned that I do now that I didn't do as much back then.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Is there, I think a part of growing and getting a better understanding of yourself sometimes is being able to get enough space between you, I guess, and how you behave or move to see the way you kind of like the roles you might or the patterns you've set, in your relationships and stuff. Was there anything or any story to like how you kind of got aware like that the caretaker role was something that you found yourself in often that it helped you to go like, okay, I might need to adjust this or what have you? Is there something particular that happened, or is it, how did you get there to get that understanding?
I think a lot of situations where you get the feedback,
Mm.
you get the response back from people that you interact with,
Mm-hmm.
um, whether it's in the form of somebody actually vocalizing that to you, or they're choosing to behave with you in a manner that's saying, okay, like what you said or what you did right there, I don't agree with or I don't get down with. So there's that great quote that Bruce Lee once said that to learn about yourself is to learn about yourself in interaction with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the ability to be able to kind of take notice of how you can be in interactions with other people, and that at times comes from people telling you, providing you feedback, or even just to look really deeply in terms of the kind of relationship that you want and what you're trying to achieve, and you're not quite there with it. And so
Mm.
there's a lot of introspection, there's a lot of reflecting on many different occasions, that you just start noticing a pattern, and I think that's kind of where that was for me. Just recognizing a certain pattern, and it's in part of having to really look deeply into yourself.
Mm. In your and I ask this so I can hit the right note in your in your work, as a therapist, because it's stuff that comes up often when people get into sort of looking at their own behavior. Is still the and especially even their processing of relationships and how they orient to people. I find that folks, I guess I'm trying to, they'll like get into like a negative judgmental kind of thing about themselves, like due to thinking about themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm always curious of ways to like talk to people. Like, is there anything that you do or use, in the way that's appropriate to share, to let people understand that, like how they can do that introspection work, but try not to like judge it as good or bad or this or that, but just like think about it or experience it. Is there any, I don't know, tips or windows, ways that you try to message that with folks?
Well, I think there's the the part of being that the difference between someone who can kind of look at this objectively and someone who sees themselves as being a very a big critic of themselves. It's a process, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a process of growth. I find that at times to steer the conversation and saying that this feeling of beating yourself down when, like, say, you're maybe part of this role of making an unhealthy or creating an unhealthy relationship. The initial sort of process sometimes is to recognize the feeling of what that means to you. Um, it's a part of sometimes a growing pain, and the discomfort is actually something that I often even point to the person. It's like, do you recognize, at least finding the value in your discomfort
Mm-hmm.
in this situation that you might have played a role in terms of your unhealthy relationship or toxic relationship? And that
Mm-hmm.
can be the start. That could be the start of a lot more growth and more introspection. It's like, at times I don't find that there's a problem with feeling bad about something, like about yourself. That can actually be the first start of the conversation that can get you further down that rabbit hole of growth and change.
Mm. Oh. Oh. Um. So, at this moment in time in your world, what's just something that's just really important to you, right now in your life? Is something
Cool. I
that
want to I want to add on one other thing too, into
oh
what
yeah.
you to, and I'll answer this question as well. Is that I find that self awareness can be your guiding light to being able to really see yourself in relationships with other people. I often stress that in sessions with individuals. It's like, your gift is and can be your self awareness. And
Mm-hmm.
even as much as that might hurt you in the beginning, it might be painful to kind of realize that, but better knowing now than never. Um, as it relates to the idea of what's important to me, um, I think time, the concept of time, I think that's really important to me. I think learning how to slow down time is really important for me, as this relates to my own personal life and the relationships that I have with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Time.
All right. I was, especially even in the current moment that we're in, um, the the relationships and the people that you're connected to, like I've realized, or I've tried to make a moment to sort of, if I think about somebody, just to shoot them a message or say something. Because I
Yeah.
may not have time to, I may not have time to like pause and like have a call and this and that and and whatever other things. But I'm like, I want to honor that I had them on my mind. So let me shoot them a message or let me get them a quick something so I know that they're there. But you get really uh as you get more responsibilities, I find you get really start to become very aware how like limited your time is in terms of how many things you can give a lot to or give a really good level to. So you have to, I find you have to edit a little bit. And you mentioned something with slowing down time. Could you give me a little more like what does that mean for you in practice to slow down time?
I think in a very simple manner of just really being present, um, in your life, in
Mm-hmm.
your interactions and relationships with people. Um, Quite often, and there's this sort of research and sort of this concept that they say, and especially in the realm of psychology and research, that they say that about half of your time is spent in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about sort of that amount of time being consumed in thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start adding up those numbers for a minute, and you start looking at during the course of your time spent in a course of a day, if half of that is is spent in your head, what does it really mean to be alive? What does it really mean to be a being in this reality in this world.
Hmm.
I'm interested in taking a little bit of that back. We can't control our thoughts in a lot of ways, but we can learn how to minimize that by certain practices. Um, and this is what I often say, and I don't like to use the word mindful too often. That's a hot button topic word that
Mm-hmm.
often gets passed around, especially in Western civilization. But I'd rather say something that can make it a little more relatable. I say that life in real time
Mm-hmm.
and not sort of in this theorized conceptual space in your head. And so when we can get more of life on real time, we get to slow down time a bit. I'm guilty of this. I'll give you an example. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm guilty of like being that cat that gets on a highway or freeway and starts driving, turns on his radio, turns on a source of music, and get in sort of this process of tuning myself out. And I don't know, tell me if you relate with this, but
Mm-hmm.
there's this interesting thing about driving, especially in the highway, because it's linear, right? You're just driving straight. So there's really not a lot of thought into that, to the process of driving. And you're just driving, and then you see your exit, and you dive off and you get to wherever point B is. And then if you have stopped for a minute and just think about what did you do throughout that period of time, like, and sometimes I'm amazed by it. I didn't even know how I was even driving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like I don't even know how I don't even remember turning right off the exit. And it's a nature, I think, of human beings is to tune themselves out when they're doing things like that. And you could be thinking of a lot of things, because human beings, we want to kind of ponder, we want to be pensive, and we
Mm-hmm.
want to just be in that place of even problem solving in our heads.
Yeah.
And there's times for that too, but I think there could be some value in being able to tune yourself back in instead of tuning yourself out all the time.
Yeah. I could bear witness to that. I mean, I know, especially I find like either stressful days. My work is when when we work in an office, when that world returns, with traffic, it could be about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And when you're either, in that space when I'm tired, I can, I try to fill it sometimes, but try to do something that I can at least engage with a little bit, like read it, like a book or audio book or podcast. Um, but other times, like if it's early in the morning, you drive and you just start rolling, and it could basically before you realize it, you can be to the next destination point. I mean, I bear witness sort of that, um, losing uh losing kind of focus in the moment. I think on the other side of it that I would bear witness to, when you sometimes when I'm in that space and I have something I really need to think about, like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of like almost like, all right, since I know I got to stay in, I'm on in Oregon, and so if you're taking the 5 south,
Mm-hmm.
towards the other part, it's pretty much a straight road for like 200, like for if you go all the way to the border, it's like 380 miles of straight, more or less. It does get a little bendy later, but you can go pretty far without having to really turn too much. You just stay in your lane. But you can then, it's kind of easy to go like, man, so this book idea I got, and just kind of let it roll. And this, I'm saying, this
Yeah. Yeah.
thing I want to read or research. Yeah, that's dope. I mean, I think that's a great example. Do you, with time, because you shared earlier, sort of like having like a structure to how you start in the day and the end of the day. Do you? Is there any? Are there things that, like, when that process is disrupted, how does that affect your feeling of time? Like if something happens, you can't do your morning the way you like to do it, or your evening the way you like that. How does that tend to put you in a sense of time?
You asked me that maybe 5-10 years ago, I would have been a different reaction and response. I'm still an ongoing work in progress, but I would say that for the most part, it circles back to the idea that
Mm-hmm.
I don't fall in love with my plan, and I keep a remembrance of that, because when things don't fall the way that you had planned it to, I'm just like, okay, that's cool. You
Mm-hmm.
gotta charge that to the game. Um, it's just sort of the process.
Yeah.
And so I don't get too disappointed or upset. I find myself rarely ever getting too upset with that. If knowing that I keep that in mind as sort of a mantra, right? Like, don't fall
Yeah.
in love with your plan, yo.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, anything can happen. I didn't expect coming down to Houston, Texas, and spending time with my mom and dad to be having COVID-19.
Right.
Like, I would think in a billion years, I thought anything like this would happen. This
Yeah.
invisible boogeyman. You know,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I really don't rush into reacting. If something doesn't go the way that I planned, or something gets disrupted. If it does, and if I do get a little upset, or if I get a little, disappointed or so, I go back again to reminding myself that, hey, this is just how life is at times, and you gotta have to expect the fact that life is going to morph, it's going to shift and change with or without you. So you
Yeah.
gotta learn how to adjust with the times and the conditions.
All right. Yeah, I think that's I mean, that's I I often find in my work and with family, like, and my kids, like, oh, we wanted to do this and this other thing didn't happen, and so then, like, someone and inevitably gets like really upset or feels like they failed, almost like in some like irreparable, I can't say that this morning, way.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'll just be kind of like, well, it's what's done is done. Like, that didn't work the way we thought it would work. What can we do, different? And I find that, I mean, I think the first time I really fully embraced that kind of like approach, even to like, especially like a workspace, because like workspaces tend to be like, well, you didn't get your TPS reports in and they're terrible, so we're gonna have to go another way. And like, to
Right.
have a situation where you go, well, what did we do? That didn't go well. All right,
Mhm.
what are we gonna do different next time? Right. And
Mhm.
then that just be the end of the conversation.
Mhm.
They kind of like, the next time, do it differently.
Mhm.
You know, I think I find that people struggle with that because they think it's like there's like some other secret motive. I'm like, no, it's really, we tried, and and what I try to remind people is that for me, it's rooted in, I thought whatever you did, you were trying to do in good, with the best of intentions and understanding of what to do, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so therefore, if it didn't go well, we just look at the, there's other factors and forces, like but it didn't not go well because you were trying to make it not go well. Like, it
Mhm.
didn't go well because it didn't go well. And then,
Right. Let me ask you this: like, does
yeah.
that, when they throw that back at you, disappointment or what have you, how do you react to it? How do you respond to that? Like, how do you feel about that?
Well, it depends sometimes. I mean, largely I feel like if I can look at the like kind of the details of what of the interaction, what occurred, if it was something I should have done differently, something that I thought, the conditions around it were different, and so I was acting in one way, and it was like, oh, I realize now that this relationship is not the same, or uh the information that I, or really most often what happens is I go back to, well, what did we agree to start with?
Okay.
And or what we were agreeing to do, and then I try, I feel a mix of things. Sometimes I feel disappointed, in myself for missing something. I go through, I have I guess you could say I have it's much more compacted now, I think, than most days than it was, earlier in my life,
Mm-hmm.
because I go, I guess, through the stages of sort of like grief, loss, anger, like the whole arc,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I do it in probably, like, sometimes I could do it in as fast as like 3 or 4 minutes. like where it's like, ooh, all right, cool. You know what I'm saying? And now I'm back, right? And other times, it might take me. I might need to take a walk, right? I might need to be like, like I might end that conversation, but for me to fully process, I might need to take a walk. Sort out what happened, and then start thinking about, well, what am I going to move on to, if there's a move on to a place to land, or and then just I do my best to let it go, but it's it always depends on the the who matters with that too, I would say, and how well, if it's the closer it is to the vest, so to speak, the more time it usually takes me to process. But I do still tend to find that same process. And the thing I try to do in the moment though, is just listen and not make any, answers or judgments or like, oh, well, I'm gonna do that. Just try to go, well, let me hear what you're saying and let me sit with it. And then I will suspend to do other stuff with that till I make sure I got all the information or at least I got what you wanted to say in. That's my, I would say that's probably the core thing that I try to do.
That's dope, man. It's a process, isn't it? Like, especially as like going through, at least from what I'm hearing is there's a point of you kind of looking at this and saying this all depends on the context of things, and you will put in your time to really listen effectively to what they're saying, and if need be to kind of take an inventory of
Absolutely
what's sort of being said and processing that and giving yourself that time and space to process.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's for me, it is if I've listened well, I've found that I'm more likely to, when I'm able or need to give some feedback, to give the feedback that'll get us where we need to go. Or to get to some level of equilibrium. But if I haven't listened well, is usually when there becomes an ongoing, like, I thought I said the right thing, or you thought you said the right thing, and we don't know what we're doing. I thought you were doing this. When was that change? Like whatever the context. If you start to move through the different parts of your world. You know what I mean? All right. So.
Very true.
So, Paul, you are a man of many interests in my time knowing you. So I was, rolling over and thinking like, should we talk about DJing? Should we talk about movie making? Should we talk about, because y'all also strike me, well, at least I don't know, I guess y'all strike me somebody that like knows about stuff. Like, that, like, like, oh yeah, you do this with that and Photoshop and you rub thing on it and you make some shirts and you make shirts. So just for you right now in your creative spaces or in your other worlds, what's some things that you're doing, or you working anything interesting that you've been pondering in the recent months or recent years to develop or do?
Well,
I know I'm opening a can of worms, so
right,
I'm just
right. I think before, like when people would ask me that question, it used to be a very loaded question because it was a loaded question for me because you're right. Like I have been guilty of getting myself into a bunch of different cookie jars, and I can't help it. I just always have had this sort of very curious nature. And it certainly led me into a lot of delving into and getting myself involved in a lot of really cool things creatively. I find myself that put it this way, when you're younger, creating something or being creative offers an opportunity to be a bit self-serving, which is not a bad thing. It's kind of what's almost to be expected, right? Like self-serving, maybe you can kind of look at it as just being explorative, and in that process, maybe you figure certain things out for yourself. As I get older, I start looking at creating and creativity as doing something that's a lot bigger than you and one's ego. So you find yourself in places where you want to, if you're choosing to do something requires putting your time, your energy, and your thought into. Let's do something that will be impactful and perhaps helpful to other people. So it's definitely got me down into different avenues of where I want to utilize my skill sets and my experiences to be as helpful as possible. Um, a big chunk of that has been through my journey into DJing, which
Hmm.
I've done for many, many years, and also the many years of working in mental health. And so I'll tell you a little story. It was in grad school when I was taking a class called play therapy, and I was once again in my head in the class
Hmm.
while the teacher was talking, and I had this sort of thought in my head about, man, it's like, okay, am I gonna be this counseling psychologist, like, or I could just jump into this realm of DJing and go hard body and just go hard on it, right?
Hmm.
I had sort of that moment in my head where I thought this was sort of a fork in the road, and it was also within this class where the teacher was really giving us this idea of being playful as being therapeutic. And so where it was interesting, it was at that moment when I was thinking, am I in this sort of fork in the road with, do I have to just quit school and just go DJing full time, or should I just go therapy full time and do it that way? Then I started to kind of shift my sort of perspective, and I saw the fork of the road more like sort of this intersection. And
Hmm.
that was sort of the aha moment for me, where I said, wait, what if you could just fuse this whole DJing thing that I've been doing for 20 some plus years and make it therapeutic? And so that led me down to the road to where I am today. And
Hmm.
amongst a few other things that I do, this is one thing that I have been developing, curating, nurturing for some time. And so hence I've been developing a system, a curriculum for DJ therapy, for which I call two turntables, or two turntables. The lengthier version of the system is called two turntables and a mind of your own. And so this is this that has many meanings to it. It's a play on words or a classic hip hop expression. But this is kind of something that I think really aligns to what I was just saying earlier. The need, I think, at this stage in my life to be creative and to do it in the capacity of being helpful,
Hmm.
and seeing that this idea needs to be much bigger than yourself. And so this is where I kind of at in one project. So this is something I'm very passionate about.
Oh, word. Wow. Um, well, I'm curious. I mean, to the degree or what would be appropriate to share, like what is sort of a snapshot of like what, like how it's used? Is it it be a practicing DJing? Is it like around a mix of certain music or sounds, or
Sure,
what is a like a component, just to get a taste or an idea of like how
sure.
what you're working towards?
Let me kind of look at it from a macro standpoint of looking at
Hmm.
it from the outside in, and then we'll get into a little more of the intricacies of it. The Let's look at the idea of a system for just a minute. To me, when it comes to creating motivation in people, or
Hmm.
to create a sense of motivation for people to change, that might take years in the process to do for some, if not
Hmm.
for many. And so, to address the idea of motivation, or to address the idea of change within yourself, right? Like, I believe that a system, creating and developing a system, can really help and facilitate some of that change and that motivation. It's a similar concept, I think, similar but not the same, but it's a similar concept to a person who decides to work out by himself in his own home with his home gym, as opposed to being in a LA Fitness or a 24-hour fitness and going into a place that's more conducive for you want to move your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been on both ends of where I felt like, man, it's like doing this whole quarantine thing and working out by myself kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But when I get into a gym, a physical gym where everybody else is working, well, I don't want to be the lame duck or the person that's sitting like being on the corner of the side of a wall just observing all this. I want to get into it too. So I will start
Mm-hmm.
moving my body. I'll start lifting a weight. I'll start doing certain things within that system. So
Yeah.
you kind of apply that sort of concept into what therapy is like. There, and we can kind of look at it a little more specifically. Mental health is something for many people. Um, Everybody has something that they could like work and develop on. I use this idea, this sort of analogy, as mental health is a way to address wellness. We often look at wellness as a form of being healthy physically, but we don't sharpen our tools when it comes to mental and emotional health. So I often use this analogy with a lot of my patients. I say, let's start developing this mental emotional muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same vein that when you get into more of a practice of developing a muscle, this seeing is believing. You start seeing some changes in you physically. Mental and emotional, like developing that muscles can be a process that you could see as well, not in the physical way, but something that you feel inside of yourself. So the system of this system that I've been developing incorporates both sort of both mental emotional um, techniques that I've learned as being a therapist, um,
Mm-hmm.
at practices of psychotherapy,
Yeah.
specifically in cognitive behavior therapy, um, behavior modification, mindfulness practice, meditation practice. Um, I've always said to a lot of my patients that in terms of mental health, I take the sort of everything but the kitchen sink approach um, to addressing some of your issues and your symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry that into the first half of a session when I do DJ therapy. We break bread. Um, when you think about sort of the issues that exists in communities of color, disenfranchised communities, marginalized communities, we look at sort of mental health is sometimes in a very foreign way. Um,
Yeah.
and there's multitudes and multitudes of issues as to why maybe individuals are not seeking mental health or they may not have the resources, so on and so forth. So I look at sort of this idea of palatability, the idea that
Okay.
we can find some ways to be relating with individuals. Well, what is sort of a common denominator? Well, I mean, unless you are from another planet, I'm probably guessing that you like music.
Yeah.
Um, so we could take that as our way of kind of breaking bread and sort of my foot into the door of the world of someone's life and personal life and experiences. And so the first half, a lot of times in this process of DJ therapy, I break bread with them. I use that. I use this part of the system. What I call the segment is called real rap. So
Mm-hmm.
I utilize things that I know from a psychotherapeutic standpoint, but also fusing it into just having very candid, very honest conversations with individuals. I provide a lot of psychoeducational tools and techniques,
Mm-hmm.
but also giving sort of a moment for a young individual to vent, to process, um, to relate, to connect. And so that first 30-35 minutes tends to kind of focus on that. Then we segue into the act of DJing. So I have a full sort of range of a curriculum through each week where we break down lessons. into specific things, where I use sort of metaphors and expressions in DJing to teach a lesson, a life lesson, a
Mm.
powerful lesson. Um, for example, week one is the idea of connecting. So what I do is I would teach the kid to literally learn how to connect every single thing to the system of this turntable DJing system. So it's non-verbal. So the act is for the child or the individual to just observe how I connect everything
Mm-hmm.
and allow that person to practice it and do it. And I make them do it over and over again. And at the end of the session and the practice, you learn how to connect the system. And so
Right.
what's the walk away or takeaway? I provide a lesson in the idea of connection, the
Right.
importance of the idea of connecting. Individuals who experience a lot of depression. What is sort of depression? To me, I define depression as being something where people choose to, whether they realize it or not, to disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
So these sort of things, these sort of lessons have a way of kind of like having uh, many different meanings, double meanings, very hip hop, very double entendre, triple entendre, um, just to kind of hone in so this idea that in the physical, here we are connecting this in order to understand the sense of connection, a connection with ourselves, a connection with our community, our connection with family, our connection with school. So a lot of things can come up from that whole lesson that we bring into the following lesson. So every lesson sort of builds on each other and it has a specific purpose and intention. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said a whole lot. Um,
Nah, so
yeah.
Paul, this is amazing though. As someone that I've been in programs, work with youth and families involved, with the criminal justice system, for the better part of, explicitly, definitely the last 7-8 years, but better part of the last 10 years, and often, the ongoing challenge are working in models around care and treatment that aren't really built with us. They're not built with people of color. They're not built with often, or they predate the musical and cultural pieces that we refer to as hip hop. They're just not rooted in the communities of the people who have to use them or are being asked to use them, right?
Yeah.
And I think any structures, any ideas of how to engage people around like their sense, how they see themselves, and using things that hopefully land more in who they are, I'm like intrigued and excited about. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really dope. You know what I mean? Because we need we need you to keep working on that, because we need that type of those types of approaches to doing things. I'd say.
Yeah, most definitely. The first session that we have, and this is part of the process, I think, of doing therapy in my approach, is that I tell every patient that I see, I don't expect you to trust me. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you should trust me at all. I think you should really get into the place of questioning me more often. I believe that trust is something that's earned, and
Mm-hmm.
so I'm interested in the idea of creating this environment that's comfortable for you and building rapport with you. So the the importance, and I'm very intentional with this, is that it's not important for me to tell you what's important to you, right? Um, I'm interested in knowing what you're interested in. So in this sort of act of being palatable and being relatable, um, I want to hear the kind of music you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Give me something what you're playing. Give me something that's in your iPhone or on your phone right now. Let's hear that. And that is sort of the foot in the door, and that is a way to kind of build. You build off where they are, you build off of what they're interested in, and then you find ways to connect with that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have And I don't want I never want to put myself in any kind of pedestal because I'm still learning
Yeah.
and so but the idea though is to, you know, I think in my 44 years of living on this earth that I've I like to think the idea that I like music on all forms and in all ways and all fashions, in all eras, and I'm interested in the idea of expanding my own musical vocabulary.
Hmm.
Um, but that may not necessarily be that child or that individual's cup of tea. Maybe not there. So as I think the role and the importance of guiding in therapy is not necessarily to impose on your own beliefs onto them, but to allow for them to see something about themselves. But
Hmm.
you know, like kind of what we understand is just to add on and to build with what
Yeah.
they have, right? And so you gotta start with something. So what's the common denominator? Let's break bread. Let's hear what you got, what you're interested in. And that's where it starts.
Oh, wow. Well, one thing I can share just as an anecdote that I think connects is one a young man I worked with many years ago now. But I remember he was going through a real challenging moment, and I went to visit him in custody actually. He shared with me a mixtape that that was very motivational for him. And he has asked if we could listen to that while we was just hanging out because I was just visiting him. So because when youth are in custody, for those that don't know, um, usually they only don't have many people that can come see them, and
Mm,
so I was fortunate enough, like where our program was structured, I was able just to go and give a visit, during the non-family visiting hours. So which is really important because that means other people's time isn't being taken and various things. So, anyway,
hmm.
enough system talk. The key was putting on the music that he found motivational and then just hanging. Allow the space for us just to talk and chew the fat, so to speak, for a good hour or so, and develop our relationship. What I mean, and gave sort of the backdrop, right, of comfort.
Hmm.
For him. And then also for me though, got to learn about something that was important to him in his life, right? By listening to the music, understanding it was for those. It was a Nipsey Hussle, one of Nipsey Hussle's early mixtapes. In
Hmm.
this particular
Hmm.
instance, and I think that I'm really inspired that you what you're doing, and I hope
I
to
appreciate
see
it.
more of it because I think it's the I'm also involved in my work in kind of a collaborative around like evidence based practices and measuring things of that nature, but from community groups that do direct service, where a lot of our evidence based tools are not they are done with humans, but they're
Mm,
not necessarily done with the humans whom they're being applied to, later, culturally and what have you. So trying to find that balance and trying to root some of these ways that folks get access to care, uh, coming from us. I'm inspired and I'm excited about it, and I like I hope to hear more as you keep doing
yeah,
what you're doing.
brother. Yeah, I mean, likewise, brother. It doesn't go one way; it goes both ways for me. So I really
Hmm.
appreciate your continual process and your contribution to what you do too. Um, Mental health is not always relatable. In fact, a lot of times it has and creates a negative stigma.
Hmm.
And my interest has always been to kind of take the road of where um, we could give a sort of a stepping stone, or at least get our foot inside this sort of realm of allowing people to kind of reframe the way that they see mental health.
Hmm.
Um, so I make things, and I've been creating this idea for years. I keep quiet about it, but I've been a little bit more vocal about it lately in the course of the past 2-3 months. I landed my first pilot program. I'm testing actually back in Pittsburgh with an organization that works specifically with court adjudicated kids who are within locked in the system. And
Hmm.
so It's going to be an 8-week program that I've developed. I've developed also an 18-week program, but I think that's a little lengthy.
Yeah.
8-week program to really explore and really put my ideas to the test, and to develop it and to really refine it. And the long-term goal is to be able to allow this system to start educating and teaching other therapists, health professionals, people who actually care, the system, so that they can start bringing it into their respective communities and spread it like a virus in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Man, well, Paul, man, we're gonna have to talk after, because I want to keep. There's some things that definitely I think that I would at least want to, as you're working on that and you're moving, that I would want to maybe try to pull you into that, or at least because I think that that is right on time. On time.
Most def. It was right on time now. It was right on time back then, and it will be right on time whenever that will be.
Indeed.
What I see from these type of exchanges, which is so important, is being able to really vet these ideas. There's nothing stopping people now. Like we have this thing called YouTube and Google. There's everything is out in the open now for people to learn and to exchange and to connect and to collaborate. I want to be in places where I'm needed. That's where I want to be. I'm interested in carrying this idea at least for several years, almost like a chitlin circuit, like getting around from place to place, and to gather data and gather information, engage in the community, and to gain more data, more information, and to really take it, to really test this and vet this out. Because at the end of the day, I'm just interested in creating this system so that this now can be utilized. I can't be effective if I'm just doing it by myself. Other people have to know this piece of information and these techniques and to be part of that process of change. And so I'm excited about the ideas that I've been brewing. I think I've been cooking an interesting brew. And I use that analogy of marinating a lot. I marinate on things for a while, and but not with just the intention of just intellectually just kind of going in circles with it, but I really want to back these ideas with action. So the first pilot session, pilot program is going to be in Pittsburgh, working in the community that really needs it. I'm having discussions now in Houston with several organizations here that are very interested with my idea. I've been applying for some grants. And so I just been kind of going through the process of doing sort of the behind the scenes, things, the behind the scenes work. And yeah, man, like for sure, we get off of this, and anything that you and have ideas with you, what like we could build and talk about, for sure, most
definitely. So, I think with what we've shared, what you've shared, which I want to thank you for sharing. I think this is a good place to wrap for this time. As with all things, I've come to a place where I want to invite people to come back for more later, right? And save some for later, because I think there's so much, and there's all kinds of other stuff I'd like to talk. We could talk about, some of the best DJ nights you've had, or places that we've been together. There's all kinds of ways we go, but I want to kind of bring us to a close for this moment, in terms of this recording, this session. And what I've been doing recently, and I don't know if it's hitting the mark, but I'm going to give it a try, is he shares something. Is there any song or some music, something that you enjoyed or thought about in one way in the past that you experience a little bit differently now?
That's a good question. Well, the one thing I'll say about music for me, and as a DJ, this sounds really strange, but maybe a lot of DJs can attest to this as well, is that because that I come from that sort of period of time of where to acquire music was like a chase, and it's kind of an addiction, and almost like digging in the crates was like a real thing. And because music is so available now, it's almost like it's so like a snap of a finger. You can get any kind of music you want to hear, right? Like in any kind of form, in any kind of way. So I was having this conversation a few months ago back with DJ Bonix, and we were just like, man, that's just like, I asked him like, man, are you over musicked? You know, like, and he's like, yeah. It's just like, yeah. And so we relate on that context, but we never stopped listening to music. And I found, but to your point though, like I find that if I'm hearing music that's more sort of rhythmic, consistent rhythmic, more 4/4 type of things, it can get a bit too repetitive to me. And that's a whole concept in of itself, because I find that sometimes hip hop is kind of limited in that way, and it needs to kind of expand beyond sort of a confined sort of, repetitive beat. So I found that music that really allows me to hear it one time and then hear it differently again has always been jazz music for me. And so to hear I've been listening to a lot of Pharoah Sanders. And so to listen to a Pharoah Sanders today, the next day, I get some kind of different vibe from it. The same album, the same song, I get something completely different for the next time. And so astral traveling is my thing. And so it allows me to be more expansive. And I think thought processes and things that kind of come around in the act of doing something in conjunction with, say, like jazz music is excellent. It's very conducive for me in my writing at times.
Cool. Dope.
I also like Freddie Gibbs a lot. I like what his whole thing.
Yeah, me too.
I go back and I'm just like, before, like I was like, Freddie, yeah, he's cool. And then I've been listening to his new album and Bandana and the stuff that he's collaborated with Madlib. I'm like, yo, this is it. This is nice. I like it.
Yeah.
What about you?
I agree, man. I mean, that's one. I've found that I move between two, kind of firm poles. One right now, well, not too firm. I give it as firm. I would say actually something in the coming very shortly in the recent episode that's going to be released soon with a good brother of ours. Diving into like original like rock and roll, like R&B, like rhythm and blues as it was understood, in the before Elvis Presley or at Elvis Presley or with Elvis Presley, because we had a whole conversation about Elvis Presley too in this. But my brother Aliasha mixes. I've listened to a couple of his mixes of rock and roll and the themes, and then the wild thing is in listening actually to like the Freddie Gibbs most recent project, and I'm actually I because the day got away from me, my plan today is listening to the Run the Jewels 4 at some point, and just because I usually it gets me going. You know what I mean? I got to work out or something. I listen to Run the Jewels. So I'm like, I gotta get ready. Like I'm either going to like cut the grass, listen to I can't, or do something physical, because usually I'm anticipating, unless they went another direction on me, to be charged up with energy while I listen to it. But those are sort of the, I'm finding actually like a interesting thread of connection between those two kind of music poles right now for me, and I'm just trying to stay in it to to listen to more. And on the topic of over music, that I do like. I always intend to put more playlists in my streaming services things so I can listen to stuff, and then like I don't remember to do it, and then I go to listen and I'm like, oh, all right, I'm about to listen to one of these ones I already know again, because I'm about to start driving and I don't have time to do a whole build a playlist for this trip to the supermarket, like so I'm trying to figure out to have some time to be intentional of organizing some more music that I want to hear, because I think like a lot of people, the entropy of managing, individual music files that are my own somewhere,
Mm.
it just has gotten too much for me to like keep up. So I just said,
So
what
much.
I'm going to do? I'm going to do is make some playlists and these two things here, and I'm gonna do what I can. It's just, but I love it. I love to hear. But those would be where I'm landing right now on the music side of things.
Yeah,
So,
we gotta recognize our own sort of way of hoarding, right? We're all guilty of
yeah.
being music hoarders, right?
Yeah.
especially in the digital world, for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
No doubt. I'm guilty of it.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, I want to thank you again, for joining me and being a part of my, my little creative project, and adding on and being able to share some of you with those who, with my listeners, and being part of my, I guess, I like to think about it, my pantheon of men that are in my life. You know what I'm saying? And there's some others that are not, that are new people that I interview, but I often look to people that I know, that I have a history with, that I think have something to offer that I don't know if other people know. So thank you for coming on.
Brother. I appreciate that, brother. Really, I really do. I really want to also acknowledge you. I really appreciate your efforts and this specific podcast that I'm now just digging more and more into some of your earlier shows. And what I really appreciate about you and Brother Majestic is just your ways of being able to kind of look at sort of the bigger picture with things, and looking into these finer intricacies, and you both of y'all, man, y'all, like, I'm in awe of y'all, because it's like I reference and cross reference, and I'm looking into things that you were saying, what Majestic saying, say, wait, what did he say? So I had to rewind 15 seconds back to say, what did he say again? And I really get into it. I really appreciate your podcast. I'm an avid listener to it, so I really appreciate this, brother.
Heard that. Well, thank you, Paul. And with that, I'm going to let us be at the end. So I'm going to say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast with Justice Rajee. Thank you to my guest, Paul Dang. You can find Paul's work on the internet at 2turntables.org, and also on Instagram at 2.turntables. And I'll have those links in the show notes. Always appreciative of, good brothers and the folks that I've met over the years for coming on and sharing their stories, and especially appreciative to get Paul to come in and add on with me. Go back a long way. So, as always, take the best part for yourself. You can support the podcast either by going to Patreon, searching up Ask Your Oldhead, and become a patron. You can go to the Etsy shop and copy a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a coffee mug. Coffee mug's going to be a little slow on the delivery with the pandemic, so I'm just forewarning you. You can also, Cash App a brother, at Justice Rajee, just how you say it. You know what I'm saying? If you want to add on to the growth and development of this project and this work. So, in any event, man, again, much love to my man Paul Dang. Much love to you. Be safe out there, especially with everything that's going on with the pandemic, which is still with us, and everything that's going on in the ongoing reality and pandemic that is, our racist society. So, keep doing what you need to do. Be safe. Peace.